The legacy of From Software's Soul series is not defined just by the amazing games that it's made up of, but also the subgenre that has been given life thanks to its very existence, the Souls-like. To celebrate this subgenre and to whet our appetites for the upcoming Elden Ring, here are our picks for the top 10 Soulslikes. Now, defining what exactly constitutes a Souls-like is a bit tricky because there's a lot of core elements of the Souls games, but for the purpose of this video, here are the key things that a game must have to be a Souls-like. Punishing consequences for death, souls, or a currency gained by defeating enemies that is integral to character progression and can be lost upon death, methodical combat, typically tied to a stamina meter, and bonfire-like checkpoints that reset the world. Also, we're gonna keep this list From Software free. This is a list of the best Souls-likes, not the best Souls games. And yeah, sorry, that also means no Sekiro and Bloodborne. Now that we've got all that out of the way, let's kick this off with arguably the first game to directly crib the mechanics and feel of Dark Souls, Lords of the Fallen applies the genre's hallmark stick-and-move combat to a more conventional, loot-driven action RPG. Though it doesn't test your mettle in quite the same way as its masochistic inspiration, its riff on the bonfire system, which gives you the opportunity to bank experience at checkpoints or keep it on you to earn more, tests and tempts players in its own way. Don't underestimate Code Vein for being anime Dark Souls. Bandai Namco's post-apocalyptic sci-fi fantasy vampire adventure brings deliciously brutal combat and some mechanically interesting twists. Switching classes and experimenting with lots of weapons and playstyles is strongly encouraged. You can and are basically expected to play the whole game as part of a duo with either a friend or AI companion who backs you up through hectic battles that are tough enough for two. Each Darksiders game has been a different flavor of hack and slash, with the first game being largely influenced by The Legend of Zelda, and the second being a mixture of a variety of character action games with Diablo-inspired loot. But Darksiders 3 was a Souls-like through and through, though its combat is not tied to a stamina meter, something generally intrinsic to the Souls-like genre. It still nonetheless employs the same style of methodical and deliberate combat that is exceptionally punishing for every mistake. Darksiders 3 also stands out from the rest of the Souls-like genre thanks to its lingering influence of The Legend of Zelda that carries over from prior games. There's a larger emphasis on puzzles and environmental problem solving than is typical within this genre, making it an interesting departure despite its firmly established Souls-like roots.
Come on then. Take a sit and have a drink. We can watch life pass on by.
Mortal Shell is shorter and less complex than many of the best Souls-likes, but it has two unique mechanics that make it stand out. You control a ghost who possesses the corpses of different warriors with different weapons and abilities, and you can charge up a block by hardening your corpse shell so you can take a hit while attacking and not get hurt. Its spooky vibe and stress-inducing combat channels the Souls games that inspired it. It just doesn't get much more Souls-like than this. One of the more defining and weirdly endearing characteristics of a great Souls-like is how obtuse it is in how it reveals its enemies, items, and story as it slowly unfolds. 2018's Ashen from Studio A44 and Annapurna Interactive is just the right amount of obtuse to inspire players to inch forth through its treacherous, minimalist world. Ashen is tough, unforgiving, and brilliantly stripped down to the core DNA of what makes a Souls-like tick. Sure, most of its characters barely have feet or even faces, and the art direction feels deliberately stripped down and cel-shaded compared to its grizzled and lavish Soulsborne bigger brothers, but all of that just makes it feel much more haunting, austere, and isolating. Not too isolating though, because Ashen really clicks in passive co-op multiplayer, where friends can team up to explore and subsequently die in its sprawling, eerie world together. Mixing bleak, dystopian sci-fi horror with hard-hitting melee combat, labyrinthine environments, and tough-as-nail boss fights may seem like your standard-issue Souls-like formula, but Remnant from the Ashes adds emphasis on a very iconic video game weapon class: guns. Heavy-duty ground combat, complete with procedurally generated stages, makes Remnant feel different enough from its counterparts while still paying homage to the games that inspired it. Most importantly though, it's a ton of fun, and occasionally tough as nails, and has some really unique lore to boot. And if the main game sinks its hooks into you, there's also 2 DLC packs and an entire prequel spin-off game to keep you going. Both The Surge and The Surge 2 take the multiplayer/countdown mechanics introduced in Lords of the Fallen and add a Monster Hunter-esque crafting system to put a unique sci-fi stamp on the Soulsborne genre. Dismembering zombified cyborgs to craft new weapons and armor offers a grisly injection of strategic fun, and some really excellent environmental design and storytelling in the first game provides a great setup to the series' dystopian future. While the story might get a little bit unwieldy as it progresses, the 2019 sequel improves the gameplay mechanics and progression loop that made the original such a satisfying action RPG. One of the first truly notable Soulslikes, Sultan Sanctuary is perhaps the one that most unabashedly embraces that identity. This is a game that wears its Souls inspirations proudly on its sleeves. But what makes it so special is that for as much as it sticks to the core fundamentals of a Souls-like, it also introduces completely new elements. There are platforming sections that play with the rules of gravity, there's couch co-op play, making it one of the best Souls-likes to play through with a buddy, there's a super in-depth skill tree that allows for a ton of customizations in terms of your playstyle, and all of this on top of super satisfying combat, a great variety of weapons that behave very differently from each other, deep progression mechanics, and much, much more. At first glance, you might not think Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order much of a Souls-like. Lightsaber battles, force-assisted parkour, and an actual story not hidden in item descriptions. But the blood of Souls games can still be found running through its veins. Many of its challenging battles against the Empire or deadly alien fauna come down to a strategic understanding of an enemy's moves and style, when to dodge unblockable attacks or parry at the right time, even interrupting with a well-placed force push. While no stamina meter is present, Fallen Order relies on wearing down an opponent's stun meter with perfect strikes and blocks, similar to Sekiro. Checkpoints to rest are sparse, and enemy ambushes are plentiful, rewarding careful progression and an eye for secrets. And let's not forget the most lovable robot Estus Flask ever to grace the screen, BD1. Okay, now before we go into our number 1, we have to call out an honorable mention that didn't make this list, not because we missed it or because we didn't like it, but because calling it a Souls-like just didn't really sit well with us. While undeniably inspired by Dark Souls in many ways, Hollow Knight doesn't really play like the other games on this list in practice. Yes, it shares a similar storytelling style of letting you piece together the history of its world and your role within it through more subtle dialogue and rich lore, as well as that familiar death mechanic of having to reach the place you died to retrieve your money, but its combat, progression, and movement systems are extremely different from the Souls setup. Most notably the lack of a stamina meter, and while there are other games on this list that also lack a stamina meter, there's also a significantly more forgiving healing system that doesn't rely on reaching enemy resetting checkpoints to refill. Fights themselves are also far more reminiscent of platformers like Castlevania or even Mega Man than the patient, timing-focused encounters of a Souls game. So, while Hollow Knight is an incredible platformer that certainly owes its Dark Souls inspiration a lot, its gameplay doesn't actually use FromSoft's signature style to the same extent as others on this list. But hey, if you disagree, feel free to pretend Hollow Knight's right here on this list and bump everything else down. We won't judge. Moving on. The best Souls-likes find a way to use what the Souls series did as a starting point, and then find a way to leap off from there and do their own thing. None do this better than the Nioh series. It still has all the essential qualities of a Souls-like, but Team Ninja manages to tweak each of those qualities in ways that make the Nioh games feel familiar, but also completely distinct. Take combat, for example. It's still got that careful and deliberate pace thanks to a stamina bar that governs your every action, but on top of that is also a key pulse mechanic that allows you to regain that stamina with well-timed button presses after each attack, which facilitates a much faster pace to the action. Add on top of that the unbelievably deep gear system, the huge skill trees for each weapon and type of magic, along with a lengthy campaign and tons of post-game content, and it's easy to see why the Nioh series is placed on such a high pedestal among Soulslikes. And that's our list. What do you think? Agree? Disagree? Still think Hollow Knight should have made it? Let us know in the comments, and for everything else, keep it here on IGN.